Okay, so you should have just seen the video on how you can loop over a list of objects to do something with every single object in the list. But what I didn't tell you is how do you get all those objects in the list in the first place? So let's look at an example. This is an example of what your graphics program might look like. I have a ball class, and I might have 5 different variables, and each one of these contains a ball object. And here inside setup is where I'm actually creating the ball objects by running the ball constructor. So here I'm making a new ball that's at 300, 300 and has a certain x speed and y speed. And here I'm creating another ball, also at 300 and 300, but a different x speed and y speed. So I'm assigning each object to its own variable. So that's the old way of doing things. Let's look at how you could do the same idea, but instead use an array list of ball objects. The idea is, instead of having separate variables for each ball, let's make an array list that holds ball variables, and we could call it ball list. So this line of code only declares the list. We don't actually create the empty list. That's what happens right here as the first line of setup. So usually we do this all in one line. I'd say array list ball list equals new array list. But here we're separating them, so we declare the variable here, but then we assign it the value in setup. And then, hopefully you're noticing, each time we run the constructor here on the left-hand side, we're assigning to a different variable. I'm keeping what's on the right-hand side of each of these equal signs. I'm keeping each constructor, except now it's on the inside of some parentheses where I'm telling the ball list what I want it to add. So if you remember, like when we had a list before, if you say, name list.add, and then you give it a string, it will put that string at the end of your list. Same thing here. Here, what's inside the green box constructs a ball object, and now I'm telling my ball list to add that ball to the end of the list. So this is going to make a list with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ball objects in it. So we can put everything in the last video and this one together. If this is what your code used to look like, where you have 5 variables and you create a ball object for each variable, and then inside your draw method, you draw an ellipse for every single variable. Let's draw our first ball. Let's draw the second ball. Let's draw the third ball. And then you tell each ball to update its own position. Now you can change it to something like this, where you start with a list, you tell the ball list to add each object one at a time, and then you have a loop where you loop over all the locations in the list, you tell the ball list that you want to get out each object, and then you draw an ellipse at that ball's XY location, and you tell that ball to update its position. There's only one more thing that you might want to do. It's still a little bit cumbersome to have a new line of code every time you want to create an object. Because what if we wanted to create 500 objects? We wouldn't want to write 500 lines of code here. So instead, we're going to use a loop to create all of these objects. So here's the idea. We're going to create an empty list, and then we're going to make a for loop that repeats 50 times. We're not going to loop to the end of the list. That wouldn't make sense because right now our list is empty. It has size 0. So there is nothing to loop over. The point of this for loop isn't to loop over objects that are already there. The point of this for loop is to loop a certain number of times, 50 or 500, it's up to you, and to tell the list to add new objects. So this is how many objects we want to add to the list to first start. And then the general pattern we want to follow is we want to make a random number for the horizontal speed, a random number for the vertical speed. We run the ball constructor where we actually create a new object, but now we're creating the object with some random speeds, and we save it inside a temporary variable. Then we tell the list, let's take that ball and let's put it at the end of the list. And each time we repeat this code, we make new random speeds, we make a completely new ball object, and we add that completely new ball object to the end of the list. So as this repeats 50 times, each time it repeats, we have a new ball with some random values being added to the list. Okay, 2 quick self-checks. What would you change about this code to make 300 ball objects instead of 50? Then, what would you change about the code so that all of the ball objects start at random positions? Go ahead and pause the video if you want. Okay, here comes the answer. All right, here we go. To make 300 objects, we just have to repeat this loop 300 times. If I wanted to make 1,000 objects, I could just make this 1,000, and now I'm looping 1,000 times, and every single loop I add a new ball. In order to make the ball start at random positions, here's what you had to think. In the last slide, in the ball constructor, the first two numbers were 300 and 300. And if you remember how we wrote the ball constructor, this number was going to get assigned to the x coordinate, and this was the y coordinate. So here, every single object we create has the same starting position. The only thing that makes it different is the horizontal speed and the vertical speed. If I want each ball to have a different starting position, I can't give it the same number for the x and y. I have to make these different every single loop. And the only way to make them different every single loop is if they're variables. So an easy thing to do would be to make two variables. Oh, I guess I got to actually declare them. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So obviously all the variables you have to declare with their data types. But if I create two new variables, x and y, that are random numbers, now every single loop we're going to get a different pair of random numbers. They don't have to be random. If you wanted to, you could do something like this. In this case, I'm saying that the x and the y coordinate should be related to which loop we're on. So the first loop, when I is 0, x and y are both going to end up being 0, and I create a ball at 0, 0. Then the next loop, when I is 1, the x and y coordinate are both going to be 2, and so I'll create a ball at location 2, 2. And then the next loop, I'll create one at 4, 4 and 6, 6. So as I loop 300 times, each ball xy coordinate is going up by 2 every time because it's my loop number times 2. So this will still give you 300 balls at different locations, only now their locations aren't random. Now their locations are going to go down the diagonal of the screen, and that's going to give a very different kind of visual effect. I hope that this was helpful. Go ahead and do the check for understanding if you would, please. And if you want to start the assignment early, you can either start the assignment directly, or there's also a relatively short walkthrough video that will show you how to apply those ideas directly in your program. Good luck.